The one thing that strikes me every time I do long distance is the volume of training that is required to get yourself into condition. And I think it is absolutely erroneous to assume that you can get through it just because you've done one before. And that goes for sprint distance, Olympic distance, half or full. I think the bottom line is training is so important. And I think when you get back into it, what I've learned over the winter, particularly in the miserable months of snow and sleet and rain, is that actually it's a necessity, you have to do it. And if you don't do it, what you are doing is planning to fail, really. So I think it's always nice for me to be reminded about the importance of training. It sounds really simple. It sounds really simple, but I think there's a lot of people who actually think they'll just get away with it. You don't get away with it. It never happens.
Yeah. So what about for people in the audience that maybe don't have lots of time to train? So we've spoken to some elite athletes, and we had the Brownlees on the stage earlier this morning, and they're blessed in being able to spend all day, every day training, recovering, looking after their nutrition, making sure that they're as fit and as well trained as they can be. But for those of us that have day jobs, families, busy lives, and have got maybe kind of 8-10 hours a week to train, how do you cram all that in?
So I think what's interesting about that is that what you describe what Ali and Johnny do, and what we do somehow is that we sort of take that model and assume that is only for elites. What they are is they are intimately planned. Their training is absolutely structured. They know exactly what they're doing and when they're doing it and what they're trying to achieve in each of those sessions. And yet certainly the guys that I look after, what they generally start to think is that, oh, well, that's what the elites do. We'll just give it our best shot and we'll just do a bit here and a bit there. And that's the biggest mistake people make, I think, is that actually if you are time poor, then what you have to be is much more planned. You have to work much harder on planning what you're going to do and when you're going to do it. Because you don't get the option of garbage yardage. This is what we call it in swimming. You don't get an option of just going out and doing a session. Every session counts. And so what you have to make sure is that you plan that session. And in planning that session, what you're thinking about is, when am I going to do it? Do I do it morning or evening? What you're doing is you're making sure that structured within that plan, if it's a very high quality session, then what you're not going to do is come into it fatigued. Otherwise that's going to impact on it. What you don't come into it, if it's an evening session, is spend the entire day at work dehydrating, being low on energy, and then rush to the session and then wonder why it's been a rubbish session. So the planning for it, if you are time poor, you have to be much more fastidious about the planning. And if you do that, what you get, you don't get any more time, but what you do, you get much better quality out of the time that you've got. And that really makes a difference.
Yeah. And how about nutrition as well? Because obviously that's a huge part of it. Have you got any top tips for nutrition for athletes?
It's an interesting, because I run a clinic, I've got a clinic on Harley Street here, and I've got a couple of specialist nutritionists. It's something we spend an awful lot of time on. I guess there are two things that I would say. Number one is that there's an awful lot of nonsense that circulates around sport, and triathlon is my favourite for what you should fat adapt, vegan, low protein, blah blah. The list goes on about what you should do. Most of which are fads, and they're fads for a good reason, because they come in and go out. And invariably they don't work. I think that what you are trying to do is tailor a nutrition plan which works for you. And I think the other thing that we focus an awful lot on is around what we call periodized nutrition. So actually, much like we periodize training in terms of blocks, in terms of developing certain aspects of physiology, what you should be doing as well is matching your nutrition to that plan. So I love listening to people who tell me about fat adaptation, and then they go out and try and do a very high quality session on 0 carbohydrates. It doesn't happen. And so what happens is the quality of that session drops. It doesn't matter how fat adapted you are. So, but that doesn't mean to say you have to eat carbs all the time. What you do have to do is make sure that prior to those very high quality sessions that you prepare in a nutritional sense for that session as well. So I think it's about tailoring it and being bespoke about your nutrition is really important, but equally making sure that it works for you. So one of the key things that I bang on a lot about currently is, I'm 51. One of the problems we have as men is we are in an environment of low growth hormone, of low testosterone, and so there's a dramatic reduction in muscle mass, which has a profound effect on strength endurance, power output, all of which limit performance. So the idea that you would go low protein vegan as a middle-aged man doesn't make any sense to me whatsoever, because what you're not doing is tailoring it to your requirements. So I think that it's what you have to think about is you have to design your program around you, and the more tailored it is, the better the results you'll get.
Can you coach me, Greg?